Hello everyone, Don Feener here. I hope everybody is safe, healthy, and productive. Today's lecture is on the Arthropoda. It is by far the largest phylum of animals on the planet, and it contains more than half of all known animal species, and they are absolutely essential to global ecology. In this first part of my lecture, I will introduce you to the arthropods and show you what kinds of organisms are found within this group. So here's an example of an arthropod. This is a trilobite. It belongs to the subphylum Trilobitomorpha that is found within the arthropods. Trilobitomorpha is an extinct subphylum. It is no longer occurs on the planet. Here are what more modern arthropods look like. They include scorpions, millipedes, crabs, grasshoppers, butterflies, horseshoe crabs. So a wide variety of organisms that look radically different from one another. So arthropods as a whole are really diverse in size, shape, and function. So here is a phylogeny of the major animal groups. You've seen this phylogeny before in Billy's lecture on the Cambrian explosion. Here's arthropods down here in red, and they belong to a group called the Ecdysozoa. And the reason why this group is called the Ecdysozoa is because they undergo a process called ecdysis. And ecdysis is the periodic molting of an organism's exoskeleton as it continues to grow. Okay, so the exoskeleton is comprised of a 3 or 4 layer cuticle, and this is shed off as the organism grows, and therefore growth is incremental in arthropods and in the Ecdysozoa in general. So growth is in a stepwise manner because of this hard exoskeleton. At periodic points, that exoskeleton has to be shed or molted and a new exoskeleton laid down, and then this gives rise to this stepwise pattern of growth. And each of these different life stages between molts is referred to as an instar. Okay, and organisms that don't have a hard exoskeleton, a non-arthropod, tend to grow more continuously. So in addition to the arthropods, there are 3 other common phyla within the Ecdysozoa, the phylum Nematoda, or roundworms. You probably know of this group because of the model organism C. elegans that is used in neurophysiology. The phylum Tardigrada, which are water bears or moss piglets. You probably know this group from watching Ant-Man movies, and they've received a lot of press in the last few years because of their amazing ability to withstand all sorts of extreme environmental conditions. And finally, the phylum Onchiophora, which are the velvet worms. It's largely a tropical group these days. And one distinctive feature they have is the production of a sticky slime that they can shoot out of these special glands that they use in prey capture and to deter predators. So here are the 4 main groups of the modern arthropoda. They're the Chelicerata. These are the spiders, scorpions, ticks, and mites. The Myriapoda are the centipedes and millipedes. The Crustacea are lobsters, shrimp, barnacles, isopods, and several other groups. And finally, the hexapods which include the insects. And these are the number of species found within each group, and we see that the hexapods are by far the most diverse group. And in fact, insects are by far the most group of animals on the planet. I should also point out that, as you'll see later on in the lecture, that the hexapods are actually found within the crustacea, but we've pulled them out and given them subphylum status along with the crustacea, and therefore that leaves the crustacea as paraphyletic. Okay, the characteristic features of the arthropod body plan include this rigid cuticular exoskeleton that I already referred to. Okay, and we see that here it is in a crayfish. All right, but they also have jointed appendages. In fact, the word arthropod means jointed appendage. And here we again see jointed appendages in this crayfish, or jointed appendages in this spider. They also have a segmented body, both internally and externally, and these body segments have been fused through a process called tagmosis into regional specialization. So there are regional specialized body parts. So, for example, the carapace here in the crayfish, or the cephalothorax in the spider. Okay, and the other character that they have is an open circulatory system. So, unlike mammals that have a closed circulatory system, arthropods have an open circulatory system. So they have a pump, or they have a heart that functions as a pump, but the heart pumps the blood into a large hemocoel, which is sort of the cavity within the body. These jointed appendages that we see in arthropods can be specialized for different functions, including locomotion, as here, sensory, as these antennae, feeding in as in the mandibles, respiration, and reproduction back here. So these different groups of arthropods have undergone tagmosis in somewhat different ways. Again, you don't need to know the details of this, but so for example, in hexapods and insects, we have three main body regions: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. And these body segments up here have all been fused together into the head. These three here fused into the thorax, and these here fused into the abdomen. And there's a similar pattern of fusion of body parts in each of these different groups. So chelicerates do it differently than crustacea, and hexapods do it differently as well. Again, but all of this sort of reflects this process of tagmosis. Okay, so clicker question. Which of the following is not a characteristic of arthropods? A, compound eyes, B, jointed appendages, C, closed circulatory system, or D, rigid exoskeleton? I'll give you a minute to pick the answer. Okay, and the answer is closed circulatory system. They don't have a closed circulatory system, they have an open circulatory system. Okay, so here are what arthropod-like organisms looked like in the Cambrian period. So whether these are actual arthropods or not is debated. Certainly the trilobites are classified as true arthropods, but this little fella down here is classified as an onychophoran, and some of these other groups are classified in different, now extinct phyla. But they were very diverse and abundant in the Cambrian period. Here's another depiction with a different set of animals. Again, whether these are really arthropod or arthropod-like is subject to some debate. But whatever their actual classification, we can see that arthropods acquired their characteristics in a stepwise manner from their lobopod ancestors. And by lobopod, we mean an organism like an onychophoran that doesn't necessarily have jointed appendages, but they do have lobe-like appendages. And one of the first arthropod characteristics that these lobopod stem groups acquired was the compound eye here. And we can see that each of these different characteristics that we refer to as an arthropod characteristic were added on in a stepwise manner. And here are the modern arthropods as they are currently defined, and these are all lobopod ancestors of the arthropods. Okay? And so one last clicker question will conclude this part of the lecture. The process of fusing adjacent body segments into a fuse specialized segments is called tagmosis, is the answer that I was looking for. Okay, so this ends part 1 of our lecture. Go on to part 2, 3, and 4.